Hello and welcome to this lecture. The first thing you normally do before you start modeling is making a sketch. And there's a reason for this, because sketching is very fast. And with that I mean that when you start drawing, you can draw something, and you make a mistake, you grab your eraser, and with your eraser you can correct your mistake in a matter of seconds. But when you start modeling right away, chances are that when you're halfway your model and you make a mistake, you have to start all over again. And that'll be very frustrating. So if there's any error you can catch during the sketch phase on paper, then you'll be very happy afterwards. You don't have to do it right now because we are just beginning and I already made a sketch for you, so hopefully I caught all the errors in my sketch. We don't have to do everything over again when we're halfway modeling. Don't worry, that won't happen. So let's have a look at the sketch and see what you can add to help you out when you're modeling later on. So for example, this hole here is not a real hole in the mesh. And we do that because we want to be cheap. And in this case, cheap is a good thing. So when we paint the hole and don't add it to the geometry, we have less geometry and the CPU, that's the computer processor, needs less time to calculate or render everything on screen. Especially with games and VR, you want to be as cheap as possible, in most cases. And the sketch I made and the model we'll build in this lecture will have a very simple geometry, but that's just because we are starting and we don't want to build a very complex model right away. And the next thing I wrote down for this model was that it's pixelated. And pixelated means it has a pretty low resolution, so you can see the pixels and maybe you don't add shadows. Just keep it simple, more or less like a Minecraft game asset. Here it says geometric shapes, so simple shapes like squares and triangles. Again, all to keep it simple to start, to first get the basics of modeling so that we have a good foundation for the more complex models we'll make later on. And the next thing you should sketch is what the textures will look like. So for example, the roof will look something like this, and then the wood parts will look something like, well, this, more like a brown color, not really a texture. And the brick parts will look something like this. All very simple, but again, that's just to start with. We will make more complex models later on. So let's click this away. Let's have a look at a viewport, and the first thing I want to explain is the origin of an object. But let's first get the cursor out of the way by hitting Shift right mouse button and click somewhere on the viewport. So again, the origin. The origin of an object is the point where it rotates around. It scales from and to. And it's also the position of the object. So as you can see here, it's on 0 on X, Y and Z. And why am I telling this? Let's first go to the front view by hitting 1 on the numpad. When an object needs to be skewed, later on in your scene for example, when your object doesn't stand straight up, but rotates a little bit, like so for example. So in the case of the well, we don't want to rotate it around the middle of the base. This will be the base of the well. But we want to rotate it more around the bottom of the base, so the bottom of this object. If you would do this wrong and you would import your asset in a game engine like Unreal or Unity for example, you will have a lot of problems by placing your object under a correct angle. If you're working with a level designer, he will surely send it back to you saying that there's something wrong with this object. So let's fix that right now. Let's go from object to edit mode by clicking here. Make sure everything is selected. If not, click A, hit 1 on the numpad to go to front view and then hit G to move and Z to constrain around the Z axis and move it up just about so. So you can see it's about here, don't have to be precise. Maybe you notice my mouse has a strange shape when I'm in edit mode, but well, okay. Let's go to object mode by hitting tab. So there's a new shortcut, hit tab to switch from object mode to edit mode and vice versa. And as you can see when I rotate now, it rotates more to the bottom of the base of the cube or well in this case. And that rotates just a little bit more natural or logic, whatever you like. Okay, are you ready? Let's start modeling. Hit tab again. We are in edit mode, as you can see here. We already moved the cursor away from the model, so it's not in the way. Okay, and the first thing we like to do is add some beams here, so we have something to support the roof. The standard cube in Blender is 2 Blender units or meters or whatever unit high. There's something you can see here in, let me first switch to object mode. So under the second quick menu you can see here 2 meters or units, Blender units. And let's close the second quick menu. And for the beans we need a second cube, so we can do that either by hitting Shift A. And then here in this mesh menu, so you can see all the meshes you can choose here. And here we'll choose the cube. And that adds a cube at the position of the cursor. But that's not what I want now, because it's very difficult to place this cube on top of the other cube we already made before. So let's get rid of this cube by hitting X and then choose vertices. And that will delete all the vertices we had selected, in this case the second cube we made. And then with the left mouse button we click on one of the vertices of the first cube. And then we hit Ctrl L. And what that does is it selects every vertex that's connected with the vertex we selected before. So this vertex, for example, is selected with all these edges to the other vertices. Then we'll hit Shift D to duplicate this cube. And hit C to constrain around the Z axis. And then move it up. And we'll move it up exactly 2 blender units by hitting the 2 on the numpad. And then hit Return or right mouse button to confirm. And now we have 2 cubes exactly on top of each other. And now we want to scale the top cube. So we'll hit S to scale and hit Shift C to constrain around the X and Y axis. And then scale in until about here. Hit right mouse button or Enter to confirm. And let's see if it's correct. Let's hit one on the numpad to have a look from the front view. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So hit S to scale, Shift C to exclude the C axis and then scale up a bit. Like so. That's better, right? Then hit numpad 5 so we can go to orthographic view. As you can see now we have the straight lines. I think that's a better way of looking at things because the perspective sometimes just gets in the way when modeling. So perspective view, orthographic view, you see the difference? Okay, so let's hit G to move the pole. And let's move it on the X-axis only. So hit X to constrain around the X-axis. And let's move it to the left like about so. So when you go to front view, this is about the distance you have from the edge. And we need another one on the other side. So let's hit Shift D to duplicate. And then hit X to constrain around the X-axis again and set it over to the other side at about the same distance as we had before. And don't be too precise because this well is probably handmade in old ages and made with natural materials, so it's not that precisely built in real life either. So let's build the roof. So with the left mouse button click on one of the vertices of the base and hit Ctrl L again to select all the vertices of the base. Then hit 1 to go to front view, then hit Shift D to duplicate the base, and hit C to constrain around the Z axis and move it up until it's about here. So a little bit inside of the poles. And hit right mouse button or Enter to confirm and have a look around. Okay, so that's pretty good, but of course the shape isn't right because now we have just 2 cubes and 2 beams in between. And what we want is more something like a roof shape. So what we'll do, we go to face select mode here by clicking on this button here or hitting 3. Not on a numpad, but on the normal number keys. And then select this face, hit S to scale, Y to constrain around the Y axis and scale inward. Until we are about here. Right mouse button or Enter to confirm, of course. Let's have a look around again. That looks about right. But what you may have noticed is that the roof is a little bit too high. So let's hit 3 on the numpad to go to right orthographic view, side view. And let's hit G and Z to constrain on the Z axis and move the roof down a bit or up if you like that shape better. I think down is nicer, but you can do whatever you want. Hit right mouse button or Enter again to confirm and have a look around again, and I think this is about right. Okay, now you can hit Tab to go out of edit mode and have a look at your model. So we are done. We made our first model. That was pretty easy, right? I don't think it was too difficult. But even so, it is your first model. You modeled it well. And if you made something that looks like this, and I bet you did, then you can be really proud of yourself because you made your first model and you can say, I'm a 3D modeler. Okay, now let's save our model, save our project. So let's go to File, and here under Save. You can save your object. So let's first go to Documents, make sure you're in the Document folder. Then change the file name by selecting it. And I believe it's selector 10, so type in 10. And then a well box model. And hit Save. Okay, that brings us to the end of this lecture. And in the next lecture we'll start UV unwrapping. That's something we have to do before we start texture painting. So in the next lecture I made a video where I'll explain what UV unwrapping is and why we need that in a 3D environment. But that's for the next lecture. So that's it for this lecture. Let's close our document if you want to. We saved it already, so we're good. Okay, see you in the next. Bye bye.